5 minutes away, so we better, to keep to time, I'll kick away the second half of the day. So we are now up to Claire and Richard Barnett. Please, welcome. Thanks for coming in. It's nice to see you.
Thank you.
And I think you've got 10 minutes from now. Go.
Right. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My wife Claire and I are here representing our family who have farmed on Wharf Road since 1964. Before us, the Field family farmed this land from the 1850s. We have the third generation working with us on this farm and the fourth generation living and helping on it. Our family is deeply connected to this land, and Wharf Road is vital to our farming operation, livelihoods and the community we serve. Today we make this submission in opposition to the proposed running down and then closure of Wharf Road as outlined in the Coastal Hazards Draft Adaptation Plan. It is very clear from reading the panel's findings on the road use in Port Levy that it is a numbers game. That the east side of Port Levy has more people, therefore the road is more important. As noted in the document produced by the panel, which purports to represent Port Levy, but solely relates to the eastern side of Port Levy, the settlement containing the marae and runanga and the holiday and retirement homes that reside there, the panel emphasises the recreational opportunities of swimming, fishing, kayaking, picnicking, all important leisure activities. In contrast, the western side of the bay, which is primarily farming with tourism businesses which directly provide employment, economic benefit to not just the community but to the New Zealand economy. The importance of connectivity of the roading infrastructure of Wharf Road has been described by the panels as 1, a road less used, and 2, a few private landowners. This dismissive comment shows the complete lack of understanding of what a rural road represents for a farming community, which is primarily what Port Levy is. It is a lifeline for business opportunities and for employment. There are 4 farms and 3 lifestyle blocks and 4 accommodation providers on Wharf Road. There are only 2 farms directly opposite us on the eastern side. Our farm alone provides economic benefit and employment through our farming and tourism operations and uses the council-owned asset of Wharf Road to allow important access to the following: stock, freight, fuel companies, shearing, crutching, fencing contractors, animal food suppliers and other stock companies, stock agents, veterinary services, compliance agencies, farm workers and other employees, guests for accommodation, orienteering, tramping, biking groups who access our land regularly, as well as family and friends. Without Wharf Road, these essential services would no longer benefit from this farming business. It allows connectivity as well as productivity. Your current plan to lower maintenance and eventually close this road would be a death knell for farming. So please, understand the pivotal part Wharf Road plays in enabling farming in communities such as Port Levy and demonstrate that we are worthy of investment. Farming would be the main employer in Port Levy and has grown and flourished here for 170 years. Linked to the history of the settlement of Port Levy are the 2 wharves which were constructed in the 1800s. The remnants of and the supply shed remain evident today and are important links to the past. They enabled the movement of people and trade in the earliest wave of European settlement right through to the 1940s, and the establishment of a farming community along with the construction of Wharf Road. Houses in this area are also remnants of our historical past. Our house was built by Henry Field in the 1860s and was the first post office and store in Port Levy, which ran from the 1860s to 1940. We also have an original settler's cottage which we have restored and offer for accommodation, and almost everyone leaves their stay there with an understanding of the history of this place. Wharf Road also enables the environment to be maintained and the biodiversity and rare plants that exist on our property to flourish. Our farm sits in a classified area as an outstanding natural landscape. Without a well-maintained road, 1,500 hectares roughly of farmland on the western side of the Port Levy would be unable to be farmed, and the consequences of that would be directly the responsibility of this decision by council. The land may not be owned by the council, but the benefit that this land provides to the ecosystems, biodiversity of the peninsula, for employment and its economy are directly attributed to access. The closure of Wharf Road would affect the people who are linked to this community and their descendants, as well as future generations. The decision is being based on cost alone, while disregarding your own goals in relation to community outcomes and strategic priorities, which are, I quote, to actively balance the needs of today's residents with the needs of future generations and the aim of leaving no one behind. Please demonstrate this in your decision to allow Wharf Road residents, and I quote again, to be accessible and well connected to support their goals to care for their environment, the biodiversity, and to be included in their community, unquote. We need you to recognise the investment in maintaining Wharf Road is vital in keeping this community as a whole and not divided, which is currently being suggested. Your decision on accepting this draft plan to run down and close Wharf Road will be terminal for farming, and as a consequence will leave a large parcel of land landlocked and untended. We urge the council to reconsider the current preferred plan and allow Wharf Road residents to contribute to a solution rather than exclude us from the discussion and not make us scapegoats for the sake of cost cutting. We thank you for your time and consideration, and are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Good. Tyler, please.
G'day. Thanks so much for coming in. Really appreciate it. It's an awesome submission. I just wanted to ask the question that I've asked other submitters, particularly on the Wharf Road residents, which is in terms of the art of collaboration. So to be clear, you're really open to collaborating with the council and your residents to maybe find alternative options, particularly for that big block at the bottom, which is obviously the key issue.
Yes, the 500 odd metres,
Awesome.
yes.
So the staff recommendation we've got here is to, I'll just do it line by line here, retain the preferred pathway for Wharf Road, but add a new alternative option of moving the section of Wharf Road located at the end of the harbour inland. Does that sound about right to you?
That is an option.
It would come down to cost, because that's very expensive in itself.
Yeah.
I think the Mayor mentioned before about putting some rock which could come easily from Port Levy to quietly be building that road up. If you look at what the early settlers did with putting in manuka sticks all the way along to break up wave action, that in itself has preserved that road for the last 180 years. So there must be lots of other options which unfortunately haven't kind of been explored.
Yeah.
The biggest thing for us is downgrading the road, not maintaining it. We need stock and trucks with trailers with a huge weight to be able to come to our farm. If there's a slip that's not going to be repaired, that automatically starts to render what we do unfeasible.
Which was my next question, last one, sorry, Mr Mayor, was around the heavy traffic and the heavy transport that goes through. How often would that come through, week by week?
Weekly.
Yeah, weekly. The period we've just gone through obviously is a particularly busy time for us, so we've probably had 8 to 10 big truck and trailer units bringing in and taking out livestock and wool.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks so much.
Pauline, please.
Thank you. Thanks for your deputation. So I think it was alluded to earlier, but is there much call for public access for recreational access to the beach around there?
It's the main area for people to come to collect, even from the Runanga, to come and collect mussels and oysters, because the other eastern side of the bay is actually a sandy, silty beach line.
Right.
So it actually is the main area people come to collect kai.
Yeah, well, that's good to know, because there's been a big emphasis on landowners and your
It always
businesses.
has been. It's the name of Kaihopets. It's always been the area for food collection.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll just sort of finish off on what way I see it. You know, one of the options is we've got to go and talk to you guys, obviously, but my contracting view is that it's easier to just build the road up. By the time you move it a lot across, the Nixon Council will want to have the separate title, and it just goes on and on. You've still got to build a road on it anyway, and where you are at the moment, it's got a perfectly good sub-base anyhow, but just build it up. So we'll see what we can do going forward. So thank you very much, and sorry I was late back.
Thank you. The materials are all there.
Good on you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okie doke. Tui, please. Nope. Okay. Susan, please.
My submission was written in November, as everyone's was, but yesterday I discovered that there's some very severe consequences connected with this plan, and I don't know that many people realise, but I'll just read what I wrote this morning in haste concerning the implications of the proposed coastal hazard adaptation plan legislation. I say based on voodoo science. I was until yesterday totally unaware of how far the proposed legislation would affect homeowners. The potential for downstream effects is alarming and includes the following. 1. Coastal risk areas being applied to limbs up to 2k from the coast. 2. Insurance cancellation or recall of mortgages. 3. Withdrawal of utility services. 4. Enforcement of managed retreat via governmental emergency powers. 5. Cancellation of property titles. These measures are a gross overreaction to reality, being based on voodoo RCP 8.5 science. The Climate Change Commission's estimate of 750,000 people and 461,000 buildings means that a huge ratio of New Zealanders will be affected, and the Ministry for the Environment's report from the expert working group on managed retreat recommends emergency powers for relocation, as in recommendation 61, compulsory acquisition of land, exclusion of Maori from the process, and preemptive or post-event relocation. So I suggest the following, which are in addition mentioned in my November submission, that the CCC Commissioner report from Dr. Willem DeLonghi for accurate science based on reality, that CCC reject the so-called hazard zones as based on implausible RCP 8.5 scenarios, that CCC file away the consultant's report for Christchurch District based on a 1.4 metre sea level rise, that CCC delay decision-making until the Dr. DeLonghi report is integrated into all council planning, that CCC hold extensive public workshops to ensure property owners are fully informed. And I go back to my November submission. By the way, would you introduce yourself?
Okay, well, I'm Hugh Thorpe. By original training, I was a civil engineer. Professionally and personally, my interest has always been water. I'm obviously long retired now, but I maintain an active interest in water.
So I say the report was not fit for the purposes of planning, which was prepared by Jacobs Group for the Kapiti Coast District Council, and this was found in court to be science not fit for the purposes of planning, which they unjustifiably placed hazard lines on 1,500 limbs, which were required to be removed by the court. And also I go into the Christchurch District report, which was done, I believe, by Tonkin and Taylor, which said that the Canterbury coast sea levels will rise by up to 1.4 metres over the next century. This goes directly against the report by, let me see, a very qualified group which says a completely different outcome, which is 15 centimetres in that 100 years. And they go into the plate tectonics, everything. So a very concerning divergence of scientific opinion. The council would be most unwise to base policy, which they have been doing, I believe, on RCP 8.5.5H+, which is even worse than 8.5. It appears that NIWA, the Ministry for the Environment, and other bodies are promoting all this, the worst possible scenario. So my recommendations were in that submission were task Dr. William DeLonghi with production of a coastal hazard risk assessment for the Canterbury coast similar to his authoritative Kapiti Coast assessment as appended below, implements research findings of the geoscientists, sea level rise in New Zealand, Dennis et al., abandoned previous inaccurate reports based on extreme predictions, cull all policy using RCP 8.5 extremes, using modelling which has only up to 1% probability, cull all managed retreat policy which uses fanciful geoscience data, use reliable science, 1.5 millimetres annual sea level rise in planning policy, and withdraw usage of the non-statutory coastal adaptation plan, use statutory coastal policy statement and coastal hazard risk statement, revert to historically accurate tide gauge data in support of those, and cull staff from all phases of unscientific managed retreat policy planning. Expect personal litigation on planners who willfully impose implausible policy on ratepayers.
Thank you, Susan. That's good. Now, we've run out of time, but I've got two questions, one from Sarah and one from Tim.
Thanks so much for that. Hey, in the plan, it states that we wouldn't be actually funding and going ahead with any of these large, expensive projects until we had seen actual movement of the sea and those kind of things. So if what you assert is correct and that we're not going to see those changes, we wouldn't be doing the big moves and shifting roads and things. So does that satisfy you that we wouldn't be spending any money unnecessarily?
Well, certainly, consultants cost an enormous amount, and also thinking of the enormous cost where homeowners are deprived of their property and forced to relocate up to 2 kilometres if required by, plans drawn up by the wrong people, i.e. sometimes international consultants who are using ocean satellite.
That's not in this plan, though. That's not in this plan. So, yeah.
Good. Thank you. And Tim, please.
Thank you. Because there are a number of sources of truth, because it is such a moving feast, with regards to our planning, would it satisfy you if we looked at, when we're looking at our long-term plan, which is our 10-year funding, we reviewed all the data when we're looking at our annual plans and our long-term plans, so we are keeping current with the latest data, relevant of where it comes from. Would that satisfy you that we are taking, or we're being prudent?
I think that's absolutely essential when we're looking at, is it $1.6 billion of debt already? Yeah. We cannot afford any extra costs which are not based on accurate science.
Great. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Susan, for making the time come in. Very good. Thank you. Much appreciated. Now, Annabelle's next, but is there an Annabelle? Oh, good. You snuck in without seeing us seeing you. Good on you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today regarding the Coastal Hazards Adaptation Plan for Kukurara to Port Levy, specifically in regards to the Coastal Panel's preferred adaptation pathway for Wharf Road. I'm here to strongly oppose this plan and urge the Council to reconsider the panel's recommendation in light of the significant impacts it will have on our community, as well as the lack of adequate consultation with those directly affected. The lack of meaningful consultation with those directly affected by this plan is deeply concerning. The Coastal Panel stakeholders have not engaged with the community well at all, and this must be readdressed before any adaptation plan for Wharf Road is settled. Community members who reside on or rely on Wharf Road have not been given a fair opportunity to provide input or propose viable alternatives. This process must include the voices of those who will bear the greatest burden of the proposed changes. Wharf Road is a critical lifeline for our community, as my mother and father spoke to before. It serves families, businesses and recreational assets that are essential to the social and economic fabric of Port Levy. We pay taxes and rates and deserve to have a reliable and functional road that provides access to our homes and livelihoods. To lower the level of service and eventually close the road without sufficient consultation or having alternative access plans in place is unacceptable and short-sighted. I speak to you today as someone with deep roots in this community. I am the third generation brought up on Wharf Road. My grandparents and parents have lived here for the last 65 years, as parents already alluded to, and I plan to be around for the next 50 years. Building a life and family business on Wharf Road, and by farming and working alongside Mother Nature every day in the farming business, we understand the challenges posed by the coastal environment and the implications of a changing climate. We maintain our own tracks and access on our farm, so we fully appreciate the toll that the nature takes on infrastructure. This understanding is why we precisely believe that the Coastal Panel has failed to adequately consider lower cost options for maintaining Wharf Road. Instead, they've merely placed it in the too hard basket because of the limited number of residents on the road. The Coastal Plan's proposal to accept a lower level of service for Wharf Road and delay necessary investment in maintenance or upgrades fails to recognise the road's importance to the local community and community wellbeing. For example, Wharf Road provides access to several businesses of farming and tourism operations, which bring income and visitors to the area. Without this access, these businesses would cease to exist, leading to loss of livelihoods, diminished local tourism, and further erosion of our community's economic resilience. Furthermore, the costs associated with maintaining, moving, or replacing other assets in Port Levy have been allocated, yet Wharf Road has been neglected. This road requires a thorough review by the Council to ratify a preferred plan that logically allows for some level of investment. The Council must consider alternative cost-effective methods to maintain access to the end of Wharf Road for the benefits of visitors, residents, and the wider community. In my online submission, I highlighted these critical points, emphasising that Port Levy roads are not merely a convenience, but a necessity for those who rely on them daily. The decision to prioritise cost-saving measures over maintaining access undermines the rights of ratepayers and taxpayers who depend on this road. Furthermore, the assertion that Wharf Road is mainly used by a small number of private landowners does not fully capture its broader significance to the community. I urge the Council to take the following actions: to reassess the preferred pathway for Wharf Road and explore alternative solutions. In conclusion, Wharf Road is more than a strip of shingle. It is a vital artery for the families and businesses of Port Levy. Any decision that impacts its future must be made with full transparency, inclusive consultation, and a commitment to ensuring the well-being of those who call this area home. I urge the Council to reconsider the current pathway and work with the community to develop a plan that reflects our shared values and priorities. Thank you for your time.
Wonderful, thank you. Sarah, question, please.
Thanks so much. Your message is a familiar one.
Yeah.
Do you think that the way forward from here might be for us, once we've finished hearings and asked some questions, to adjourn this while staff collate information, and if we ask staff to go back to the community, over to Kokararata, and talk to residents directly and look through options before coming back with that information?
We're just writing.
Yeah.
Already.
So you think that would be a useful way forward before we make decisions?
Certainly.
Yeah, thanks.
Yanni, please.
Thank you. I mean, I was just keen to know if you think that not just staff, but actually the hearings panel coming and doing a site visit would be of use, just to come and look firsthand.
I don't know why you haven't already been to Port Levy. A beautiful place, plenty to do.
I've personally been there, but I mean actually going there and actually looking at it with the residents and the locals and,
For sure.
and the staff at the same time.
Yes, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you, Annabelle. Wonderful. Thank you for your trouble. Thank you. Okay, is John here, please? Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is John Crawth, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to the hearing panel. I own a house and farm at Wharf Road, Port Levy. My family moved to Port Levy over 40 years ago. I've been a lawyer for over 30 years, and part of that time farmed for 10 years. The concerns I have relate to the draft plan and the initial recommendation that no alternatives be provided for Wharf Road and Port Levy. I was delighted to see that following the meeting with council staff in Port Levy that the report forming part of the agenda for this meeting, now has a new recommendation. That is, the council adopt the adaptation plan with an amendment so that there is a new alternative option of moving the section of Wharf Road located at the head of the harbour inland if that is necessary or practicable in the future. I also endorse the comments that have been made by Lloyd Scully, as I sat next to her, the solicitor acting on behalf of our Wharf Road residents group, that she made earlier today. There's no point in me repeating the technical points Lloyd's has made. She's done a lot better than I would have done myself, and I don't want to waste anyone's time in doing that. I would ask that the council endorse the changes recommended by Lloyd's when the plan for Wharf Road is approved. The council should be aware by now, common thread, that there has been a total failure to consult or obtain feedback from any residents of Wharf Road before the initial recommendation in the draft adaptation plan was prepared and released. This is a flagrant breach of natural justice. To be frank, Wharf Road residents have been badly let down by the representative in Port Levy who was supposed to consult with us as affected parties before the recommendation was made. It's also important to stress that the part of Wharf Road that may be susceptible to sea level rise is only a short distance. In fact, in golf terms, a par 4, around 400 metres or so.
You're better golf than me.
Also, the road is not sealed, it is flat, it's single lane, and it shouldn't be an expensive exercise to put mitigation measures in place, i.e. planting vegetation, installing locally sourced rock, as Mr Blatchford quite rightly and elegantly pointed out, or fill extensions, so the life it can be easily extended. Now, residents, we're happy to work with the council staff and councillors and hearing panel, and if they come to see us, to achieve this. Also, if in the future Wharf Road is needed to be located further inland outside the flood area, then surely there is a way to make this happen at a minimal cost. And I think the other point that probably hasn't been talked about so far, but no resident on Wharf Road is asking the council to flood-proof their dwellings, and nor should they. We just want to be able to access our dwellings and the land that we own. We don't want to be left in a situation where we're landlocked. Who would? And there's no reason for that to happen. The dwelling I live in is 60 metres above sea level, and the house where my mum, who's sitting behind me, lives, she's up 100 metres above sea level. Neither of our houses have ever been the subject of flooding or extreme weather events. It is my submission that the council has an obligation to provide roading access to homeowners and to prevent them becoming landlocked. I note that the 2021 storm event in Le Bons Bay and Goffs Bay, following an OIA request, it was confirmed that a total of approximately $1.2 million was spent on Goffs Road to preserve access, and that was probably for one or two families, and fair enough. There's another approximately $400,000, all these amounts exclude GST, spent on Le Bons Bay Valley Road. I would note that Wharf Road did not need expensive rectification work because of that storm event. In summary, the council needs to treat everyone in Port Levy the same and consult properly. The best way is to carve off a Wharf Road so meaningful options can be discussed with landowners, so that either the existing road can continue to be maintained in a cost-effective way, as pointed out with wise practical words of Mr Blatchford, and the costings that, really are not these pie-in-the-sky estimates, or instead there's a provision for an alternative access inland for Wharf Road at a later date. Actual and proper consultation should mean that real and practical alternatives are put in the plan that addresses Wharf Road. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yep, Pauline is...
Oh, thank you. Thanks for coming in, John.
Yep, welcome.
Just in your submission, you mentioned that you'd welcome a site visit by Andrew Hensley, who's a council transport engineer. Has that happened?
I've met Andrew today. He was brilliant when he came out and met with us at the Port Levy School. Andrew told me he's been on leave and he only just returned today, so it hasn't happened. But Andrew's very keen to come and talk to us and look at practical ways to continue the road, which can happen. So no, it hasn't happened yet, but I'm hopeful it will happen.
Oh yes, it sounds like he's keen. So that actually needs to happen.
Andrew has very good local knowledge of the area of Banks Peninsula and Wharf Road, and obviously like all the people that live there do too.
Right, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant, John. Thank you very much for coming in. Great.
Okay, no, lovely.
So now we get to, last but not least, is Ian, please.
Do I need to push a button on this?
As long as it's green, you're
Okay. Do any graphs appear up that I presented at all? Or have you all got copies of them?
good. We've got copies.
All got copies of them. So my submission came about through a Let's Talk request that I had made a year earlier, a discussion that I'd had with the council or your representatives. And I was told at that meeting that any science would need to be referred to Wellington rather than to the council. And from that, I took that the science was all made by scientists in Wellington, and however democracy works first at the local level. So I'm going to bore you with a fraction of science today, but it's very simple. The historic record shows that in France since 1807, and in fact I've got figures that go back to about 1711 in France, sea level rise has been linear, despite at the same time about 360% increase in man's emissions of carbon dioxide. And you'll see that in my graph. The rate of increase has been 1.04 millimetres per year for over 200 years. In Littleton, for over 100 years, it has been 2.9 millimetres per year, but it's linear. It's not exponential and it's not changing. And that's not a surprise, because since 1659, the oldest temperature records on the planet have been recorded in England, and they show a linear increase in temperature. So we've got a linear increase in sea level rise, which correlates perfectly with a linear increase in temperature. It's not a surprise, therefore, that NIWA's data on Lincoln and Dunedin and on Wellington and on Auckland show a linear increase in our temperatures. There is no change in the rate of change that is happening. It's also no surprise that rainfall, which has been recorded in the Selwyn area for well over 100 years, has not had a change in the mean or the level of extremes. And that was a report done by Aqualink, submitted to the Selwyn District Council. So what I don't understand is, why are you worried about adaptation? Adaptation to what? There are no changes. You simply need to keep doing what you've always done, which is to manage the variations that we see from time to time. There are no changes in extremity of any event that is happening, and that can all be defended. I have done applied research for over 40 years. I have a patent under my name, and I have pleaded with authorities to do a more thorough presentation beyond 5 minutes, such that you could see the evidence instead of believing what you're told by people with a vested interest in the IPCC and in Wellington. Thank you.
Good as gold. Any questions of Ian? Yep. Melanie, and then Aaron.
Are you dismissing the concerns of people behind you, like in Wharf Road, who are worried about potential of climate change over the next 50 years?
The message I got from them was that they were concerned that their road wasn't being looked after. The message I didn't hear was that they had concerns about climate change. They're assuming that we're being told the truth. But when I started to look into this several years ago now, having moved down from the North Island and been to the Fox Glacier, I realised that something didn't line up. Well, that's been my employment for over 40 years, to see where things don't line up. And I have presented to multiple forums, and no one has been able to show me where my data is wrong. And I would love an opportunity for your best people, and you can bring in whoever you like. Rod Carr was brought into the Selwyn District Council to try and refute my data, and he couldn't. So I'm prepared to take on anybody and put the information up there for everyone to see. It's very easy to follow, as my very brief presentation has done here, that there is not a problem. And in fact, the IPCC has agreed that man contributes only 1% of the radiation that is affecting climate change.
Thank you. Aaron, please.
Yeah, so going back to Wharf Road, do you know it well? Have you been over?
No, but I dare say we'll be going for a drive to see it.
Yeah, because it would be, because a number of people today have referenced the 1.3 millimetres per year, which over 100 years is one, unless it changed since I went to school, it's
130 millimetres.
Yeah.
That far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, okay, yeah. 130 millimetres over that time.
In 100 years. Yeah.
There was the marker sticks that people referenced. So it'd be good if you looked at those and found any old photos that are really old at there, because you should see a change on those or not.
You'll definitely see a change
Yeah.
in this area of 2.9 millimetres per year, but it's linear. And all around the world, if you go to the NOAA site, there's well over 100 records from all around the world. And the one I presented are the oldest figures. Right? All of them show a linear increase. In some cases, it's actually the other way around, because the ice that was once there has melted and the land has raised up, which meant there's a negative sea level rise.
Might be warmer, just not this summer.
No, definitely not this summer. No.
Pauline, please, and then Tyler.
Thanks for coming in. Often you find the damage of this infrastructure we're talking about, particularly roading in this case, is done by extremely more intense and more frequent storm events that coincide with a high tide. So disregarding sea level rise, what's your view of those sort of events?
There is no change whatsoever in extremes or frequency. And the data I've presented there, on over 100 years of rainfall data, shows that. And that is consistent with around the world, and it's also consistent with the insurance body who's done an analysis of this. Our problems are created because we put down bitumen and concrete and roofs. And when you do get a good downpour, which is not abnormal, they happen, unfortunately we haven't planned for those.
Well, that's in the city, but we're talking a rural setting
Fine.
here with...
Yep, and if you travel out onto anywhere where there's hills, you will see small gutters cut through the soil by rainfall. And I grew up in northern Australia where we used to get still get cyclones. It doesn't always hit the same place, and when it does, it has an effect. But then it hits another place and it has a similar effect. But there's no change, it's always happened. Our topography shows that we've always had downfalls.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very good. Thank you, Ian. Thanks for coming in. Okay, we're going to have a 10-minute break, and I will be back. When we are back, councillors will have a chance to ask questions and receive further advice from staff. And following that, we'll see if we can put together what changes we may like to see for the plan. So it's 10 past now, 20 past. Thank you.